This game was played on the internet. I was black. The time control was 2 minutes with 2 seconds on each move. It was a French defense. Although it started with d4, normally white plays e4, black responds with e6, white plays d4, and black plays d5, and that's usually how the French defense starts, but it can also start this way, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, e4, d5, e5, knight f d7. Also, instead of e5, white can play bishop g5, he can play e takes d5, and probably a few other moves, but e5 is what he played. I played knight d7, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e5, and queen e6. This is all book, and if you're new to the French defense, you might wonder why, for example, after knight f3, black doesn't take the pawn. Or if we turn things around and we ask why white doesn't take the pawn on c5. And the reason is simple. After c5, black is putting more pressure on the d4 pawn, and white doesn't actually want to take the pawn, because then black simply develops with tempo. So let's say, for example, c takes c5, bishop takes c5, and black prevents white from castling unless white puts something in between, like, I don't know, just to give an example here, like queen e2 and bishop e3 or something. But he could also perhaps castle long, but I think it's not a real problem. But it doesn't make much sense to take the pawn, I think. So knight f3, knight c6, and also black wants to keep this tension in the center. So there's no rush to take. If white would ever take, again, black develops with bishop takes c5. So both players are kind of delaying this the capture in the center here, either d takes c or c takes d. Bishop e5 is just a developing move. Obviously, the bishop has to come out somewhere. Bishop e2 is, I think, it's passive, even though maybe it is playable. Bishop d3 is also an alternative, but after black could potentially play a move like c4, and then the bishop doesn't have too many squares, except, back to e2 or f1. So bishop e5, queen b6. Again, black is adding more pressure on this pawn on d4. He played bishop takes c6. It's not actually necessary for white to take this this knight right away. He can also play probably the most common move here, bishop e3, because this bishop on b5 is protected by the knight on c3. But this is just a variation in this opening. So, and here instead of queen takes c6, I decided to take with the pawn, and the reason is that, well, obviously I could take with the knight, but then I don't have as much pressure on the d4 pawn. So I think when I take this pawn with then back the piece with the pawn on b7, I'll still have this pawn and my queen kind of pressurizing this pawn here. And also, like I did play off the castle, I did take the pawn. I now have the option to play, no matter how white chooses to take, I can also play a move like c5. I think that's actually the most common move here. So he took with the knight, and instead of c5, I decided to play bishop c5. And this is also a book move. It develops a piece and pins the knight. It's as simple as that. Here he played knight ce2. I think a better move would have been bishop e3, because he just develops a piece. Okay, maybe the pawn is hanging on b2, but I'm not so sure if that is such a problem, actually. He could even play knight to a4 or something. But bishop e3 is also a book move, the most commonly played move, I think. But he played knight ce2, obviously protecting this pawn on b2. I played bishop a6. I would prefer to have this pawn on a5 and only then bishop a6, because often bishop a6 right now, this pawn cannot move. And also the light square bishop for black is a sort of problem piece in the French defense, because I mean, when you have this structure and it's almost like a pyramid here, this bishop doesn't have any real good squares to move to. So actually, in the French defense, black can also play b6 and then develop bishop a6. That's actually quite often played. It's a good idea, because if black would ever get the chance to trade that bishop off, then he doesn't have to worry about this bad bishop. He plays c3. And here I play the castles. Rook f2. Rook f2 doesn't make much sense, because before you play rook f2, the knight was pinned to the king, but right now the knight is pinned not only to the king but also the rook, so I don't think rook f2 is a very good move. I play rook a to b8, rook b1, again protecting the pawn, so he can move the bishop. I play queen c7. I play queen c7 because, well, he could play b4, and okay, obviously white can't take the bishop because the rook will be hanging, but after b4, the bishop has to move one day anyway, and then this queen wouldn't actually be doing that much on b6. So, well, and also I'm putting more pressure on this pawn over here, even though right now it's protected by that 4 pawn. Bishop e3, bishop e7, queen d2, and here I'll play c5, knight b3, bishop c4, with the simple idea that this pawn is now indirectly attacked, because if this knight would move somewhere, or actually, of course he did move the knight, but I mean, I'm threatening simply to take the knight. When he takes back, I win a pawn. It's as simple as that. So he played knight from e to c1. I think that's a bad move. I think queen c2 would have been better. And since he was still moving a knight, he could have played like this. So, but that's what he played. I played f6, another very typical move in the French defense. He takes. I play knight takes f6. It's not obviously a better move than bishop takes, because the knight now, after knight takes f6, I'm threatening to play knight to e4. He played rook f3. I did play knight e4 anyway. Queen e1, bishop d6, knight d2. Takes e5. F takes e5. And here I played bishop takes e5. And I'm threatening this pawn on h2. He played rook f8 check. I took back, and now we played knight to knight e2. Obviously, overlooking this threat, I just took the pawn with check. No, remember, this was a Blitz game, so stuff like this happened very easily. He played king h1, only move. I played bishop takes a2. Not actually necessary, I think. Maybe I could have tried rook f5 or something with the idea to put this rook on, h5. But I didn't see that. I played bishop takes, rook a1, bishop e3. I could have gone to c4 immediately, but I didn't do that, so he played rook a3, a bad move. Rook f1 check, knight g1. Notice that if this knight hadn't been there, this would have been checkmate in just one move, actually. I play bishop c4, b3, and here I was. I don't think I had more than 5 seconds or something on my clock when I played queen g3. Obviously, I did see the idea here that after queen g3, when it takes, I have d4. So what's the idea with d4? Well, the idea is simply that if I don't do that, I'll play something like, well, the most obvious move here, queen to h4. He has queen takes d5 check, and I'm pretty much lost. So that doesn't work. But d4 delays that. I mean, it kind of shuts the door in front of him, so he's forced to take the pawn. I played Queen H4, the move that I wanted to play anyway. And here he played Bishop G5. Big mistake obviously, because now I can just play Rook takes, checkmate immediately. But again, when you have only a few seconds on your clock, it's very easy to miss moves like that. And here I made my mistake, if you like. Here Queen H5 is just a blunder, obviously. I mean, I had checkmate in one move here. So after Queen H5, he lost some time, because no, I don't think actually he lost some time. He resigned. I think he was disgusted by himself here, because I mean, when you play a move like Bishop G5, and he had actually something like 30 seconds left on his clock, and he plays Bishop G5. I had maybe 3 seconds here, if even that much. And I immediately played Queen H5. I didn't even think about it. I mean, it's completely obvious there. I can just play Rook G1 checkmate, and that's it. But I didn't see that. So, and the idea is simply that, why is Queen H5 a blunder? Well, Queen H5, then White can play Rook H3, and I'm forced to take this. And I have a discovered check. He takes my... I have a discovered check, and he goes to H2. I take his queen. He takes back, and now Rook G1. And I think White is better here. Obviously he is better. I mean, he has a knight. Sorry, a bishop. But again, you don't see stuff like that when you only have seconds left. Sometimes you do, but for the most part you don't. So Queen H5 was just a blunder. But the biggest blunder was Bishop G5. Again, Rook takes G1 is checkmate immediately. Okay, I hope you enjoy this look at a game that I played in the French defense recently. And I'll see you soon.